Hi everyone. I decided to do a little bit of a video and show you what I call my spike antenna. I've been using one for 2 years. I made one for Phil's at L3PAE. He's been using it a lot and they work really nicely. The plan was to film outside and I just started and it's raining, so I just decided to film it in the office. And yeah, so the spike antenna. What is a spike antenna? Basically, I've got this aluminium angle section. As you can see, it's angle. It's about 25 by 25. I sharpened the end. It sticks into the ground. And if I move forward, I've got an aluminium plate that's bolted onto the spike. I initially riveted it, but the riveting tends to come loose after a while because the rivets just deform and it becomes loose. So I've now bolted it on and I've put nylocks on so it doesn't come loose. Then this mount, it's a ball mount that we used to use on trucks. I generally use the spring on it, but it makes it incredibly heavy. But that's the way I normally do. And on the back, you've got the center of the coax, which goes to the center of the antenna, and you've got the braid that goes to the plate, the spike, and the radials. Then, over here, I'll put a wing nut, and I've got 3 radials. The radials are 2 meters long, and they just tighten with a wing nut. Now, theoretically, they all say that you need probably 40 radials to be effective. This has got 3, and you'll see the SWR on the graph, which I'll put on the screen. SWR is 1:1. I set it up for 7.09, so it will do from probably 7.7 upwards. But it's very narrow, having a loading coil. But it works, and you'll see from the previous video, I can get to somewhere and deploy and be on the air in less than 2.5 minutes. If I hurry, I'm guessing 1.5. But normal pace, 2.5 minutes. And it works really well. So, this is the spike. Those are the radials. The radials I throw out at roughly a third. So what I mean by that is 120 degrees, roughly. It doesn't have to be, and it still works. And these antennas, so on top of this, I normally have the coil, or the spring, but the spring is very heavy. I'm guessing the spring weighs about 1.2 kilos, so it's a lot of extra weight. On top of the spring, you've got a 1.2 meter fiberglass mast with a helical coil around it, and then on top of that you've got a coil, something like this, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then you've got a whip. So it's quite long, but when you've taken it apart, the total length is less than 1.2 meters, so it's in your car, it's easy, it lies on the back floor. That's what I like about it. The coax, the piece of coax I've got on here, I'm just using RG58, and it's about 6 meters. You could go longer, it's just I'll put it down next to the car. So when do I use the spike antenna and when do I use my normal mast dipole? If I've got time and we're going to go and do an activation, I'll put up a mast. Generally I'll use the 6 or the 10 or the 12. I've got the 6 meter SOTA beam mast, and then I've got the 12 meter spider beam mast. The 6 meter is quick, the 12 meter takes a bit longer, and it depends what I'm trying to achieve. If it's just a quick POTA activation like I did on Wednesday, this works fine. Also, you stick it in the ground and you're on the air. If I do a normal POTA with the 6 meter mast and I put a dipole up and the whole thing, it takes me probably 10 minutes to get on. This if I rushed would be under 1.5, generally 2.2, well 2 minutes 20. So it's quick and I like this. it just works easily, and I can leave it in the car, and it's easy. Okay, you get two lots of coils. What I use most of the time is the spike, no specific length. This plate could be stronger. Spring on it's quite heavy. And then I've got the coax and the radials. So on top of this, as I said, we've got the 1.2 meter fiberglass mast with a helical coil on the outside on top of the fiberglass mast. And then you've got these little coils. These were made by a company called Webb Industries. I don't know if they make them anymore. And the coils have got a frequency range. This one does 12 to 13. It used to be commercial, so that's what I've got it for. But I've got a 40 meter, and that does from about 6.7 to 7.8. I've got one for 80 meters. I've got one for 60 meters, so for 5 megs. I've got a few. The only issue is these coils cannot be adjusted, so you have to adjust on the whip, which means you need a different whip for every coil. So generally, once I've set it, I'll leave the whip and the adapter in the coil that I've got the right one. That's really the point. But there's other options. So we used to install HF radios and HF radio systems in Africa. They would use them for long distance trucking before satellite phones. And what we would generally do for a mobile installation is mount one of the same bases that I've got on the spike. We'd mount it on the vehicle. We'd put a rubber standoff on the gutter so that the whip wouldn't tap against the car and drive everybody insane, or the truck. And then for coils, we would use these coils. There's generally two types. This coil, if you look closely, that's what it looks like. So in the top here you put a 108-inch whip. I have no idea what that is in decimal, but they were always sold as 108-inch whips. That's what it is. Then on this coil, by turning the center in and out, you change the SWR. So inside here's a coil, here's the center, and you would change the inductance by moving this in and out. Once you've set the frequency, there's a lock ring, you lock it, and there we go, SWR's done. These coils worked remarkably well. The SWR on these coils would have been about 1.7, 1.8, 1.5. They're not one-to-one, whereas these little coils are one-to-one. So what we used to do on these is put a capacitor on the mount of the antenna between the center and the braiding, and that would drop the SWR to 1-to-1. So this is the one. These were a little bit wider band. This one I've written on your 14 megs. Works really nicely. So when I moved from Africa, I brought a whole bunch of these coils with me, and they just easily adjustable and they work nicely. This is a second version. It's basically the same thing. So that was the previous one. It's a fattish coil. This is a bit narrower. This is a little narrow, or more narrow banded. You've got a longer center coil. Again, you turn it in and out to adjust it. This one says it does from 8.5 to 12.5. So you turn it in and out, SWR meter on, lock the ring, and there you go. Ideally this would also have a capacitor, but they work without. SWR at 1.7, you just use the tuner on your radio. So that is basically what happens. So I'll show you a little bit more. So I've just stuck this into the ground. Throw the radials out. So I've just thrown the 2 meter radials out. They don't have to be at 120 degrees exactly, but I've got roughly 120 degrees, and you'll see the SWR graph. It's 1:1 at, I set it for 7.1, and I think the best SWR is at 7.092, so it's as close as anything, and it's 1:1. So that's this, but you get other options. Okay, so this option works just as well. The only problem is the whip. The whip is 108 inches, so you can't just put it on your motorbike. If you've done something similar, let me know and send me a picture. Thanks for watching.